Hi everybody, today is Wednesday. I have my Bible open here to the book of 1 John, and it has this amazing phrase in it. It says, "But perfect love drives out fear." Perfect love drives out fear. Last week we talked about love. We said that only love transforms a person. This was over and against what we talked about the previous week, which was judgment. And we said judgment is kind of like God saying, I love you too much to watch you throw away your life like this. Love is what can transform a person. Judgment can't transform a person. It can shake somebody up. It can wake somebody up. But it's not going to affect a deep change inside of a person. But God's love will do that. And one of the changes that love can affect inside of a person, that God's love can affect inside of a person, is that love drives out fear, like we read in 1 John chapter 4. Perfect love drives out fear. Now, first of all, we have to make a distinction. Isn't fear sometimes a good thing in the Bible? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Sometimes the Bible talks about fear in good terms. That's true. We have to understand that the fear of the Lord is different from anxiety, uncertainty, terror. It's a reverent fear for God. It's a respect for God and obedience to God. So when it says perfect love drives out fear in 1 John, it's certainly talking about a different kind of fear than the fear of the Lord. John is certainly not saying that perfect love casts out the fear of the Lord. John is saying God's love casts out the other fears in our lives, the anxieties, the uncertainties, the worries, that those are evaporated when we encounter deeply the love of God. This past Sunday in church, we took a look at the parable of the prodigal son. And I mentioned a couple times this scholar, writer named Craig Barnes, president of Princeton Theological Seminary, and what he said about the elder brother. Another thing that he talks about in the same place I encountered his words on the elder brother is he talks about how perfect love casts out fear. And he made the illustration that if a child is afraid in the middle of the night, you can't rationalize the child out of it. You can't cast out that fear by speaking reasonably to the child. If the child thinks that there's a monster under his bed, you can't stand in the doorway and say, now, Jimmy, we've talked about this before. I think you know there's no monster under your bed because monsters aren't real, so just go back to sleep. No, any parent who is at all compassionate to their child is going to go into that room, is going to sit on the bed, is going to hold their child in their arms, and is going to love them until the fear that that child had evaporates and just wisps out the window. Only love can cast out that child's fear. The parent is going to be the one to love their child until the fear is forgotten and disappears. Perfect love casts out fear. And Craig Barnes shared a personal testimony on that front. He said, the only thing in my experience that can help me when I have late night fear, maybe you have some late night fear, maybe you know what that's like, maybe that phrase means something to you, late night fear. He said, the only thing that can help me when I am experiencing late night fear is to get up, get out of bed, and start reading through the Psalms and immerse myself in God's love. That's the only thing. I can't rationalize myself out of it. I can't think of how unreasonable I'm being. I can only go and reorient myself within the love of God. That is going to be the thing that casts out my fear. It's interesting in the Bible, in the Gospels, stories of Jesus, that Jesus gets quite annoyed, upset when people show fear. More so than when they show doubt. Fear seems to be really problematic for Jesus. And the answer, Craig Barnes suggests, going back to this verse from 1 John, could be that the amount to which we are overwhelmed by fear is an indicator of the amount to which we are experiencing and acknowledging the love of God in our lives. That somehow that fear and that love are polar forces. And the more we give in to fear, the more we draw back from God's love. Because after all, perfect love casts out fear. This is what it says, the entire verse in 1 John. This is 1 John 4, verse 18. It says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love." So these two things are dueling forces in some sense. And what John, the writer, is saying is the more we immerse ourselves in God's love, the more fear will start to evaporate out of our minds, out of our hearts. The more our anxieties will be stilled, because we will be immersing ourselves in God's love. Just like that parent who comes in and holds the child and comforts the child and reassures the child until the child forgets all about the fear that they have. If we immerse ourselves in God's love, our fears can disappear. That's an amazing thing to acknowledge. That if we immerse ourselves in God's love, we can think of it this way. Whatever you're worrying about, whatever you're concerned about, look at it squarely in the face and say, if this is God's plan that this thing happens, there's nothing to worry about. It's God's plan. And if it's not God's plan, there's still nothing to worry about. God loves me either way. God's got this. I'm spending all this time worrying. That little monkey brain inside of us is looking for reasons to worry. It sabotages us at every corner. But if we anchor ourselves, center ourselves at God, in God's love, that perfect love will cast out all fear. That is a promise of hope from the Bible for us this week. I hope that hits home for you in whatever you are struggling with, whatever you are anxious about, whatever you're worrying about, whatever uncertainties lies before you. Immerse yourself in God's love and find that the more you sit in God's love, the more your fears are cast aside. Have a wonderful week. We will see you again next time.